plant's own emergency generators. And so, to be clear, the plant was not hit, was not damaged, but the Russian military has controlled this plant since the early days of the war. Ukrainian workers are still there, to some extent being held hostage, and they're running it. And they intentionally have done this now 6 times, as you noted, switching over to emergency generators as a safety precaution. The generators were in use for 11 hours yesterday, and then they've gone back to the external power supply. But it's hugely concerning. The top UN nuclear official, Rafael Grossi, he said, quote, each time we are rolling the dice, and if we allow this to continue time after time, then one day our luck is going to run out.
Ukraine's Energy Minister Herman Halushchenko said negotiations with Russian leaders to demilitarize the plant have stalled. Jack, why is Russia holding on to this site so tightly?
Russia has actually wanted to try and connect this to the Russian electrical grid, taking that Ukrainian power and giving it to themselves. They haven't been successful yet. And certainly that's a danger that could spark new tensions or perhaps make the plant more unsafe, as Greg was talking about. But this is a really an economic motherlode for the Ukrainians, the Russians, or whoever controls the plant. It's more than 10% of Ukraine's power generating capacity and nearly 50% of its nuclear power capacity. So when you talk about a Ukrainian economy that's already battered as much as it is, losing basically a third of the economy every month, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant being online is a huge speed bump for the Ukrainians and their ability to wage war, and certainly the Russians recognize that.
Well, Greg, just ground us a little bit in what a catastrophe at this nuclear power plant would mean for the people in the area. Help us understand.
Well, Ukraine
so what do you think?
Suffered
Have
the
you
worst
read anything
nuclear accident with the Chernobyl plant back in 1986. So the Ukrainians know better than anybody what it can mean in terms of devastating an area, just taking it out of commission.
What do you think of my writing?
This is in the heartland of eastern Ukraine, a big population centers around this plant, and the plant, even though it's offline and not generating electricity right now, you have to keep cooling the nuclear material. So you could, even if the plant does not get hit, if it doesn't have a power supply to cool the nuclear material, an accident could happen. It could spew radiation, and literally millions of people in eastern Ukraine and beyond would be in danger.
We're talking to Greg Myrie, national security correspondent at NPR. Also with us, Jack Detch. He covers the Pentagon and national security at Foreign Policy. And Saleha Mohsen, senior Washington correspondent at Bloomberg News. U.S. officials say they reviewed intelligence that suggests a pro-Ukrainian group was responsible for the attack on the Nord Stream pipelines last year. The Ukrainian government denies their involvement. Saleha, what does the new intelligence say?
Yeah, so what we have here is a discussion about the Nord Stream attack back in September. These pipelines were ripped apart by explosions, and U.S. officials at that time said it was an act of sabotage. This was not an accident. The U.S. intelligence community has some new information saying that it was a pro-Ukrainian group that attacked Nord Stream. It is not saying it was the Ukrainian government. It's just saying it's a pro-Ukrainian group. This has been a pretty big mystery. Russia has the ability to carry out an attack.
Namely, why I'm so confident that deglobalization is past the point of return. The idea is that if the United States has benefited from globalization for so long, why, even if it was in danger, wouldn't the U.S. just kind of double down? 3 things. First, you got to look at why the United States did this in the first place. Globalization was never about the economics for the United States, or at least not about the economics in a traditional sense. The United States had the world's largest economy long before World War II. And with the war, we found all of our potential rivals, cooperation nations, friends, allies, enemies, everybody put together had an economy that was about the same size as the United States. And economic growth was hard to come by. Economic security was impossible. And a big part of what led to that was competition over resources, over lands, over security, basically all of the things that have colored human history since the beginning. So the Americans came to the conclusion that when they were facing down Stalin in the middle of Europe, that there was no way that Americans would be able to economically, politically support the kind of conflict where the Soviets were right there and we're an ocean away, especially when we'd be fighting on the territory of countries that had been absolutely devastated. So the solution was to bribe everybody, to use our Navy to patrol the global oceans so that any one of our allies could go anywhere at any time and interact with any other player, access any material, and especially access the American market, which was really the only one of size to survive the war. The catch was you had to let the Americans write your security policies. And so never forget that from the very beginning, the very concept of globalization for the United States was never about economics or trade. It was about security. We pay you to be on our side. And that worked. And after 40, 45 years, the Cold War ended because the Soviet system could not compete, because the Americans not only held the security upper hand, but it created this alliance of economies that were massively larger. So by the time we got to the 1980s, Korea, which had been the world's fifth poorest country in per capita terms, actually surpassed that of the Soviet Union. So there was just no long-term competition to be had. Now, that was 30, 35 years ago. And since then, the world has changed. We've entered into a hyperglobalization era where any number of other players have come into the global system and participated under the rules the U.S. set up. And this means it's not just the West and it's not just the Asian protectorates, but it's Southeast Asia, it's Brazil, it's India, it's Russia itself, and of course China. We're no longer in a world where the U.S. economy is as large as everybody else put together. Based on how you do the math, the rest of the world combined is 3 or 4 times the size of the United States. So doing an indirect economic subsidization, as the U.S. had for 45 years, became less and less tenable over the next 30. And we're now in an environment where some of these countries, China for the most part, are so overextended and so dependent on globalization that the only way they can survive is as the United States increases support, not decreases. Their demographics mean they have no market. The lack of military reach means they can't get energy. And their dependence on the Russians means that the country that is most likely to use economics, especially raw material supply, in order to achieve geopolitical concessions, is now their single largest partner. Newsflash, that's not going to end well. Okay, so that's kind of piece one. The idea of globalization is no longer benefiting the United States because we've never viewed it the same way as everyone else. But there's a couple other reasons to think of. First, American politics. During the Cold War, we had a pretty strong bipartisan foreign policy. Remember that American foreign policy is a reflection of its domestic policy, and every generation or two, Americans go through and kind of refabricate what their parties mean. This is part of the side effect of having a first-past-the-post single-member district system, which is a fancy way of saying that you vote for a candidate who's going to represent a specific geographic area, and they have to get more votes than whoever comes in second. So the parties have a vested interest in throwing as wide of a net as possible so they can get that extra marginal vote. Well, every few decades, politics shifts because demographics change and economics change and security changes. And if you think about what we've been through the last 35 years, the Cold War has ended. Hyperglobalization has risen. Hyperglobalization has fallen. The baby boomers were in their prime. The baby boomers are now retiring. We've had the information revolution. We've had social media. Of course, we're going to handle our politics different. And when you do that, the factions that make up the parties move around. Remember, big net, big tent parties. That means they've got lots of factions that are always struggling for dominance and influence. When politics shifts, those factional alliances don't make sense anymore, and so they have to evolve. And the politics don't just rise and fall within the big tent party. They fall out, they shift sides. And if you look at what has happened so far, none of it supports globalization. So, for example, unions have largely fallen out of the Democratic coalition. The Trump coalition was fairly successful at drawing them out. They are very anti-free trade. The Trump administration also kicked the business community and the national security conservatives out of the Republican coalition. Those were the two factions for economic and security reasons that were most in favor of globalization. And so now we've got the Biden administration and a Trump-led Republican coalition that is basically having a tug of war for the unions. So it's just like we can't have a conversation about immigration in the United States because the unions don't want to have it. No one in Washington wants to talk about globalization in a positive light because the unions are at stake in terms of which political alignment they're going to take. And the two groups that used to like globalization, national security and business conservatives, they're not even part of the room anymore. But probably the biggest reason is the third one, and that's demographics. When you urbanize and industrialize, and for most of the world, they didn't start that in earnest until 1945, or in the case of the developing world until 1992, you move off the farm, you move into the town, and instead of working on a subsistence agricultural system, you now are getting a services, a manufacturing, or an industrial industrial job. And that means you are living in condos or single family homes or townhomes that are crammed together. And in that sort of environment, kids go from being free labor to just being expensive headaches, and you have fewer of them. Well, for the rich world, these transitions started 75 years ago. For the developing world, they started 40 years ago. You play that forward, and the world is literally running out of people aged 20 and under, and has for 20 years now, which means now most of the world is running out of people 40 and under. Well, the whole idea of trade, the whole idea of globalization is someone has to buy the stuff. Trade makes no sense if there's nobody on the other end of the sale. And we are now entering a world where the people who traditionally have done most of the consuming, people 45 and under, the folks who are having kids, buying homes and cars, they just don't exist in the necessary numbers to sustain the system. You've undoubtedly heard from me about how the Chinese and the Russians are the two fastest aging societies in human history, but the Germans aren't far behind, and the Koreans behind that, and the Indonesians, the Indians, and the Brazilians are actually aging faster than what most of the developing world has done for the last 70 years. And you only have to fast forward to about 2040, 2045, before the average American is younger than the average Brazilian, and 10 years after that, younger than the average Indian, Indonesian, or Mexican. So we no longer have the security parameters to make this work because the Americans aren't interested. We no longer have the economic basis to make this work because we don't have enough young people to consume, and the Americans are taking a political moment for themselves that's going to last a few more years in order to digest whatever is going to happen with the unions, and that is more than enough time to kill any remnants of the globalized system. What would need to happen if the United States really wanted to get back in this game is some sort of security scare that scares us more than the rest of the world, where we feel we need to pay for a new alliance. The Ukraine war is not that. If you look at what the Biden administration has done, all the deals that are on the table are on security. There's not a single guns for butter trade. In fact, every single trade war, every single tariff that the Trump administration put into place, the Biden administration has doubled and tripled down on, except for one. There has been a deal over aerospace with the Europeans, but that's it. If anything, the Biden administration is far more anti-globalization than the Trump administration was, or at a minimum, it's actually putting into long-term policy. So even if the next president happens to be a strong globalist, they're going to have to unwind 8 years of anti-globalization sentiment that is now hardwired into American policy, and another 8 years under Obama of just complete strategic apathy. You're not going to do that in 4 years. So we are talking best case scenario. If you want to be involved in a globalized system, another 6 years before the Americans might belly up back to the table. By then, China will be gone.
Well, there you go. I played that because that guy does an excellent job in putting the macro picture together, right? The big picture. Not the little component parts, not the little players that have a lot of power and access and have their own agenda on the side. And the ones that, the Davos crowd, those guys are just the poster children of those hidden agendas, right? And there are a lot of them. And that's why we only get to see. I was reading Bacon today, Middle Ages philosophers. And they were, science was allowed. The church finally said, okay, Copernicus and Galileo, okay. Everything doesn't revolve around us. Okay, yes. And yes, there's galaxies and universe. Yes. There's all that stuff out there. Yes. But it's still God's thing. And we're God's, business plan here. So the bottom line, first of all, the only thing that's real is love. Right? I read the Bible a lot. And people, the Bible is not. It's like you buy a new car and you get a owner's manual. That's what the Bible is. But so is the Quran. So is the Bhagavad Gita. And they're all pretty much saying the same thing. There's a higher power. There's one higher power. And then we all kind of fit into it. And we're here to learn about that higher power. Now, Christ was, the Prince of Love, the Prince of Peace, the Dove of Peace. So Christianity is about peace. Has Christianity ever, America is a Christian country. Well, we've just blown up half of the world in the last 20 years and killed about 20 million people, right? and we're going on about Russia invading um, Ukraine. Come on, what about what we did to Iraq twice? And there was no either one of those things. And the Desert Storm '91, George H. What's his name? First, you have to know that Kuwait had been part of Iraq, and Iraq had been part of Persia. All those countries there, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, they're not real. They were made up by the Balfour Agreement, by French and England, making lines on a napkin, and a good. You want to go watch a good movie about this? I mean, movies are one of the best vehicles to get a good picture of what's going on. And one is, Lawrence of Arabia. Last, Lawrence is a lieutenant who kind of just is a, Oxford scholar, and he's down in the basement drawing maps and getting drunk. And then, the English Aries kind of said, "Oh, here's a young man I can use," and send them out there and started asymmetrical warfare against, basically Germany's ally, the Persian Empire. And that's what the World War One was about, getting rid of the Tsar and the Persian Empire. That was what it was about, right? Because without getting rid of them, you were not going to bring on materialism on an industrial scale, right? And then bring on globalization, right? And globalization, all is doing is not, it's not this, the path of humans ain't this thing that, oh, we're moving, we're progressing, oh, this is progress. No, sorry. Our Earth has been here 6 million years. The Christian folk, well, it's only been around 6,000 years. I mean, if you believe in the Bible, all you got to read is Kings. It's this big long line of kings, about 3,000 of them, and they all lived 600 years here, 900 years. I mean, if you add up all the years of the kings, that's like 500 million years. So there've been Homo sapiens sapiens around a long time. If you read the Bible in the beginning, and guys came down from the sky and went into the women of man, blah blah blah. So what does that sound like? Sounds like the Anunnaki, right? Sounds like extraterrestrials have been, other folk have been here forever. You go watch Midnight Swim, that was on the Cartoon Network, and they had this great little thing around 2 a.m. This little cartoon about alien lands. Finds the monkeys, turns them into Homo sapiens, caveman. No, not even the guy before, Lucy, before caveman, was kind of stupid, right? Do, 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 do. That's us, right? And the alien just keeps trying to teach him, because the alien wants to train him up to be a good slave, right? Go dig that gold up, right? And the one who's the smartest is the cheeky monkey who's bopping around and telling the moron, hey, do this. Then the moron does that, and the alien goes, ah! So very similar to the story in the Bible. But see, God, that truly does exist, and I hate using that word. So I'll say Elohim, right? Or any of the other names of the great maker, right? The person who's started the ball rolling. And in the beginning, everything was dark. It's called dark matter. And then there was a great light. And there we are, right? And we started off with logos, the word, right? And so, anyway, all of these things are quite interesting. And the guy who started off this little thing was a great, giving you a picture of the maximalization. So he doesn't really, he just said, all this stuff ain't going to work anymore. And America only did it for this reason. And he did a very nice little quick summary of why we, the last 70 years have, what we've done and why we did it and how it was doing it, right? That he doesn't go into the deeper reasons, the hidden hand reasons, the things that motivate, and in physics, and that was, again, the Middle Age guys were talking about Okay, there's God. So what is he? We don't know. He's the unknowable, right? And then there's science, and there's Newton who kind of defined all these kind of natural laws, of physics, and they were very, clear because you could observe them with these peepers here. But we don't. These peepers don't see like infrared. Whereas, once they discovered infrared, they thought it was a magical thing. But no, majority of all insects see infrared. Majority of all birds see infrared. And a majority of plants see infrared. So we're the only ones who don't. I mean, a lot of mammals see infrared. A lot of fish see infrared. We don't. We have very limited senses, because if we had the senses of all these insects and animals, our little, cognitive sense would be totally blown out of the woods, and we have a hard enough time, understanding what we think is reality just with our limited senses, because we have severe blinders. You put blinders on the horse, because horses, they ever look at their eyes, they got this like 360-degree view, and so things can freak them out. So we want them to draw a carriage or do a job for us, we have to put severe blinders on them so they just look straight ahead. And that's us. We have these severe blinders on us, so we just see straight ahead. And so guys like me who think in a different kind of context, because we're not motivated by, I've been around catastrophic events my whole life. So I know they happen, right? So I've been kidded into believing in the magic story of religion, no matter what religion is. Now I know I'm a theologist. I do not follow religion. Theos means to understand through spirit, through your heart, through that higher connection you serve. And the only real connection there, the only thing up there is love. And the Bible, Christian Bible goes on and on and on about how loving God is, right? And how Jesus, you can only get to that guy through Jesus, right? And these are truths, but they're misnomers in their interpretation, because it's saying you can only get to that guy through this guy, and we have the key to this guy. You got to be a Christian if you're going to go through Jesus. Well, that's not true, because Jesus wasn't a Christian. He wasn't even Jewish, right? They kept saying he was a Nazarene, right? And that wasn't like a cul-de-sac over there. It was not a belief, but a type of person. There were many of these guys, prophets, who came along. Now, Jesus was more than a prophet, right? That is pretty obvious. But there were other folks that were kind of close to him, in other cultures. You look at Buddha. Now, Buddha wasn't Jesus, but Buddha had that understanding of self-awareness and conscious intent I am, right? The story of Buddha standing by the side of the road, and he's just like glowing in the understanding of love's co-creation. He is like, right? And if you ever go back in the day when I was in alternative medicine, and I got into it by working my draft board, when it finally caught up to me, he said, "We don't trust you with a gun. So how about doing alternative service?" I said, "Sure." First, they put me in VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, just started. And I went down to Mississippi. And, I wasn't like one of those liberal people. I wasn't a black person. I wasn't this. I wasn't that. I was looking at everything in love, right? And I was manifesting that kind of understanding with everybody. Not just the black little kids I'm supposed to be teaching, but also the state administrators and this person and the sheriff and everybody. And they'd all be just like, instead of wanting to kill me, they were like, ooh. So basically they plucked me out of there and took me back to New York and said, okay, how about working in the VA? Right? Go to Fort Hamilton and Brooklyn and go be a bedpan guy. That'll be safe for us. I said, okay, sure, why not? Well, went over there. I was a bedpan guy, but I'd show up. A friend of mine owed me $500, and he didn't have the cash. So he gave me his motorcycle, right? Harley, right? And I basically, riding around New York, wasn't bad. It wasn't a gigantic Harley. It was like the smallest Harley they had. So it was getting around New York. It was pretty good. And, he had a license, on the thing. And so I just kept changing the date on it. And I really didn't have it for very long. I had it for about 6 months. And I would just, and I was living um, on the Brooklyn side, right near the Navy Yard. I could actually walk to work, but I have to go through gated things, right? But there's this whole section. If you're on the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, and there's the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, there's a chunk of these red brick buildings that the Watchtower owns, right? And when I stumbled into that neighborhood, there were 4 or 5 buildings right between the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, and they both had walkways, right? And so I could walk over the Brooklyn Bridge, and that would drop me off like right around Pearl Street and Chinatown and the City Hall, and I could take the Manhattan Bridge, and it would drop me off right over near Canal Street and Little Italy, right? And about 20 blocks up, but the bridges were right next to each other, so I could take either bridge. And I had a bicycle, and I had this motorcycle that would actually go. I mean, the Brooklyn Bridge didn't have stairs; it just had this ramp. Manhattan Bridge had stairs, and I could actually ride up the stairs on my motorcycle and go right across, right? And because to get on the highway, I had to go all the way this way and then get all the way back to, and the BQE at certain times would just be a parking lot. So anyway, I got they sent me up to Fort Hamilton, and I would just show up to work, and I'd be in. It was springish summer's time, and it's nice. When I first got the thing to be a alternative guy, I went down to Mississippi in the winter, late, about October. I was there October, November, December, January, February, March, April. I said, Al, we love you, but gotta go. So I went back to New York and went into Fort Hamilton around April, right? And I showed up to work, in like shorts and a Hawaiian shirt and cowboy hat, mirrored sunglass, cowboy boots, and a motorcycle, and real long hair, right? And I looked like Allen Ginsberg, big black beard. And because he had been one of my mentors, he was my roommate, 1966, 67, right, on 9th and B. And so I had all these people behind me. That's why I am the way I am. I'm not like anybody else. And pretty much we're all put on this earth not to be like anybody else, but the system to control, to manifest singularity of purpose of the corporate structure. We are programmed to want to have what's on the TV, what's on our screen, what's being told to us. We want to believe because it makes us feel safe, right? And that's one of the biggest motivating factors of this mud puppet is fear. And so if you're fearful, well, I've died 7 times, so I kind of know what death is. What's the worst going to happen to me? I die, right? And I'm going to die pretty soon, and we all are. As soon as you're born, you're going to die. Now, I died the first time when I was born. If it wasn't for Dr. Black, I'd have been dead then. But she stuffed me back in an easy bake oven, put a mask over my mom's face, and had her breathe nitrous oxide to mellow her out and get oxygen into my system, because nitrous oxide expands the capillaries and blood vessels and all of that, and arteries. And so, I went from being blue to being pink, right? And so, and I hadn't been clipped off. I mean, actually, my umbilical was strangling me, and those moron doctors who wanted to hurry up because they wanted to go play golf was like strangling me. And Dr. She's 5'2". She came in, saw what was going on. She knew, karate, and so she kicked this guy in the leg, and he just fell down backwards. And she like pushed him out of the way, put a box there, stuck me back in the easy thing, and then told the nurse, put her on nitrous oxide, which they did. right? And she did all these things that were like no one was doing before. No one ever did that before. I mean, that's the one thing they should put every woman who's having a baby on nitrous oxide as soon as she's starting to deliver, because it mellows them out. The pain kind of goes away, doesn't get in, the only thing that gets in the baby is super high enriched oxygen. And so anyway, there are a lot of things they should be doing in medicine that they don't do. But when I showed up there doing that, and the thing, I was an orderly. That's what my nomenclature. But I was all over the place, talking to everybody. How you doing? Let me read your palm. Blah blah blah. And after about 2 or 3 months, the head guy, who was a colonel, came into the ward I was working in, and I was working with this guy who was, he was a basketball star, in high school, gets out of high school. He's not rich. He's not white. But he had a good, he could have gone to college if he had the right person behind him, because he was really good at basketball. But it wasn't quite the right time. It's not like now. It's 1968, 69, or 70, somewhere around there. Anyway, so he got drafted, went to Vietnam, lost both his legs and his arm. And then sending him back, helicopter picked him up so he didn't die, took him to, Saigon, got him stabilized, put him on a C-130 that flew him to Germany. And in that 12-hour flight, all they did was stick a needle in his arm, put him on morphine so he wouldn't do anything, so he wouldn't jump around and scream and yell. And because they had about 200 guys in a C-130 and landed in Germany, they kind of, whatever surgery they needed to do to stabilize him, to be moved to the hospital nearest to his neighborhood. And they did. And that whole time that he was there for like about a month, he was on morphine just to be, so I didn't have to deal with him. And then they got him to, Port Hamilton and rolled him off the airplane, put him into my ward. And the guy kind of woke up a junkie. He had to constantly be kept on morphine, otherwise he'd go into like, I need the help. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? And then look, what happened to my legs? Why don't I have an arm? Oh my God! And my deal was I would mellow these guys out without any drugs or anything, just talking to them, right? And they kind of eased out. And the thing about heroin is that it goes to this little receptor, same one that the thing that affects this like little receptor that makes you feel good. That receptor is also there. The other things that go in there are sugar, nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, any kind of sugars go into that receptor, along with the opiates, right? And so, and the opiates are the easiest to get away with. I mean, there is that 3-week period where the getting off of it is pretty intense. So that's why they brought into the wards that stuff called, it was called aldophamine. It was invented by the Nazis because the Nazis didn't have enough crazy people to run all the crazy stuff they were doing. So aldophamine, you get shot up. You didn't get stoned, but if you didn't get your shot, you went up, you climbed a wall, right? And so you didn't get stoned, but if you didn't get your shot, you went up the wall. It's called methadone here, right? And of all those kind of, it's a synthetic opiate. It isn't a real opiate, right? And so of all those kind of opiate drugs, methadone is the one. Once it gets into that, of all of those things, the other ones are hard to get rid of, nicotine and caffeine and stuff like that, but still, aldopamine was designed, once it gets in there, that's it. You're a junkie for life, right? And now you can get them off of that with alternative methods, right? So one day, I've been there 2 months, and the colonel comes in and goes, Al, come over here. Oh, yes, sir, because my dad was a colonel. Yes, sir. He goes, I've been watching you. You have, what did I do anything wrong with? I said, no, you're doing some pretty good stuff here, and you don't even know what you're doing. I said, okay. He goes, you're going to be my protege. I said, what? You're a surgeon. You run this place. You're a bird colonel. How can I be your protege? easy. You have a big heart. You've got a really interesting mind, and you have this just instinctive empathy towards other people that disconnects you from your ego. Very few people have that. I said, okay. Now, other people had told me that. I mean, I had other great mentors and teachers, and I'd been going to some pretty interesting schools since, from the time my grandma took care of me at birth till 6, and then from 6 until 13 when I went into the seminary to be a rocket scientist for the Pope. My godfather was a Cardinal Cushing. And when that Nazi nun murdered me in first grade, I mean, she crushed my esophagus. That's why I talk a little strange. And I breathe a different way. And, people, wherever I sleep, my body, I mean, we have all this gook in our body. And the drains that I would normally have were destroyed by this nun. She grabbed me by the throat, put me up against a concrete wall, and she was a left-handed, so she broke my jaw, broke the orbit in my eye, broke the little bone in my ear that has you here. So my mouth is wired shut, my esophagus is crushed, my voice box is kind of destroyed. This I can't see out of this eye, and my brain, the sutures in my head were like crushed like a melon. So I was in pretty bad shape. And she hit me once. I don't want to say I deserved it, but I'm a cheeky monkey. I was in this class. It was in the mid 50s. We were having to get under the duck and cover exercises in our first grade class. And there was this big window. There's the Empire State Building. And I just was sitting in my chair, and I'm like, get under the table. Hey, get under the table. A sister. See, Empire State Building. It's ground zero. Russians dropped their only hydrogen bomb. That turn everything into atoms. That first it'll be a blast of white light, which will all burst into flame, and then the concussion. That big glass window will be turned into razor blades. Will be cut up like bologna, and then the shock wave from the nuclear shock wave will come and blow us into atoms. And just as she picked me up by the throat because I must have twigged her a little bit. And she put me up against it, and it was like, and I was a little peanut of a guy. I was about 4'6", right, when she did this. And she was this big gorilla. I was gone. That's it, lights out. And the only thing I saved my life, because she was, right? And I was a bloody mess. And all the little kids in the first grade were like traumatized. Forget the atomic bomb. So, just at the moment that I probably would have died, a truck backed into that gigantic window into our classroom, right? And guys with the clipboards, that's how good the duck and cover thing was going, with their little stopwatches and everything. Crash, explosion, half the stuff is like flowing out the door of the first grade class, and they come in, and the nun is, and they like drag her off of me, and so first punch gone, right? I wake up, I don't know, a week or two later, and I'm in this hospital. Everything is white. The nun, these things are walking around, and they're white, right? And I can't move anything. My head, from the top of my head to my waist, I'm in a cast. I'm just right, and everything. I'm wearing this thing on my. I have little things, just out of one. I can only see out of one because this eye is gone, and I'm just seeing out of this one eye, and I have two little straws up my nose, and one little thing in my thing, and a hose down. And so and I can't say anything. I can't, just can't move. But I have two little straws out my ear. No, well, out of this one ear, not out of this ear. And I'm hearing these nuns say, "Oh, well, when when they take the cast off and he's okay, we're going to give him a frontal lobotomy." Talking about me, right? And So I'm like this, and I'm going, uh-oh, what's going to go on? And all of a sudden, I hear this explosion. I can't see. I'm only seeing out of one eye. And I see my Aunt Gracie kind of go by. And then I see Dr. Black, right, come behind her. And Dr. Black's chauffeur, who is a gigantic black man, who is her not only a chauffeur, he's a police detective, right? And a few other things. He had been a military policeman, MP, and he was a serious security type of person. Anyway, but Aunt Gracie kicks the door in and goes over this nun, and I just see her go over and slug, and the nun was just, these two nuns were just there, white kind of shadow. There was no real definition. Aunt Gracie, red dress, right? Dr. Black, she always wore black, and so I just might call her Dr. Black. And she, Aunt Gracie, just KOs this one nun who goes flying into the other nun. Aunt Gracie grabs me out. Dr. Black looks at me, and the policeman turns around and walks out. And basically, before they all walk out, Aunt Gracie hands me to the policeman, big arms. And we're going out, and there's another guy by the elevator holding the elevator. And we're walking out, and Aunt Gracie, this nun, comes, "What are you doing?" No. Aunt Gracie kicks her right in the crotch. And she flies through the air, smashes into the exit door. And I hear, blah, boom, bang, she make, boom, blah, 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 right down the staircase, right? We all go in the elevator, go down. We go to, there's the limousine. There's another guy waiting by the car, opens up the doors. I get put in the back with Dr. Black and that guy on the other side, he has the door open for the black detective who's going to drive, and they drive me to Dr. Black's hospital, which is Roosevelt Hospital, which is where Aunt Gracie and my mother ran the hospital back in the 30s, and that's why I know Dr. Black. Anyway, so I've always had quite interesting life, right? And always had love's co-creation right there to pick me out of the fire, right? About 20 different times in my life. I've been shot twice, and both of those times I was serving God, I was serving God's unconditional love, right? And I was in co-creation. I worked for the New York City Housing Authority because I helped put together this other nonprofit housing authority that the city should have been doing. We took over abandoned buildings that were owned by the state. We used the Homestead Act of 1876 to, put people in them. I was a, master electrician. I got licensed, metered electricity put in these buildings because the gold standard of living there is your electric bill. So these are all strategies I use to help folk. Anyway, so the New York City Housing Authority fought us for 2 years, and we're really nasty. And then we won every legal thing, everything, and we just kept winning. And at a certain point, I had this friend, Kerry Shea, who was probably the most powerful human being in the Democratic Party at that time in New York State and in the country. He was one of the fixers, as they say. And so she kind of went to the powers that be and said, "Listen, these guys are actually good for you. Let them do their thing. If you fight them, they will eat you alive. It'll take some time. It'll be really messy, but if you fold them in," and see, that's the real what works in small d Democratic Party, democracy, so much in America, is that the system, the powers that be, know that it's a lot easier just to give people crumbs than to piss them off, like what's her name said, "Let them eat cake." No, just give them a few crumbs, right, so they can be satisfied. Like what's happened in St. Louis, that has been totally off the hook. The police department has been a criminal enterprise its whole existence for the last 200 years, but that is policing in America. got to realize the history of policing in America. Another good movie to watch is Gangs of New York. And there's a great scene in the beginning. First you see this Dutch guy up on, it looks like he's on the deck of a ship, but it's just his, place outside his big house, his patio. And he's looking down into New York, and it's mine, and blah, blah, blah. And that's why his house was there. So he could watch his boats coming in, right? He's got a big telescope. And he could make, he could see all the boats first before anybody. So he had his people down in the, Wall Street to make, buy, sell stock, right? And that was a robber baron, right? And so that's the first scene you see. And then the next scene you see is clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop, clip, clop. This horse, nice fancy horse, come into the Five Corners, which is basically the Lower East Side. It's where all the flotsam and jetsam of the immigrants were coming off the boat into New York City. And this was the pogrom, or the ghetto that they were. And every, 20, 30 years, it'd be a different ghetto. It'd be a black ghetto, then it'd be Irish ghetto, then it'd be German ghetto, then it'd be, Jewish ghetto, then it'd be Italian ghetto. And so clip, clop, clip, clop, clip. And these really fine, fancy schmancy, Dutch folk, businessmen, come in, open thing. There's two women and this guy, right? And there's a policeman waiting right there, right? And the thing stops, and the policeman puts down a wooden box. He helps the lady step on the box and go on to a wooden staircase that goes up and goes on a walkway, like an elevated sidewalk, right? Not way, 10 feet above the slop of the Five Corners, right? There are no sidewalks, there are no walkways, there are no duck walks. There's nothing. It's just slop, right? And these crappy buildings, right? And all these streets going all over the place. And so, and guys are cutting up pigs in the slop and then selling them right there. It's like, really gonna want to eat that. So the rich people, I got the little things in front of their nose, and they're going, "Oh, someone should do something about it." And they're going up the stairs in a little can, and the guy puts in the penny, and there's a sign that they go underneath, going up to the walkway, and it says "The Liberal Way," which gives you the straight up of what liberals are. This movie is made in the 70s. This guy who made Gangs of New York was saying, what are liberals? People who feel guilty about being racist, classist, rich, the separation of the poor and the super wealth. They don't care. We want to keep them down, right? So they give them a penny, right? And so the women go up going, "Oh, someone should do something." And the rich guy goes there and he takes out of his little thing, and he's got all kinds of paper money in there, lots of Benjamins, and he pulls out a penny and puts it in there. Liberal way. So the policeman goes, sir, can I see your watch? And the rich guy goes, "Why do you want to see my watch?" "I just want to prove something to you," right? So the rich guy goes, "Well, okay." Because his policeman actually works for him, not, to pray, support and protect, the populace expendable. Rich guy, we're going to take care of. So the gold, watch goes in the hand of the policeman. The policeman puts it on a nail on a board supporting the steps going up to, I said, it'll be safe right there. And so the policeman goes up with this to protect the rich guy and the two women. And again, as they're walking down the liberal way, and they're walking and making comments, the rich guy is talking to the women in a total patronizing and misogynist way. And he's basically talking to them like their property, right? One's his wife, and I think the other one's the wife's sister, right? And the wife's sister, who's, they're both, wife is attractive, wife's sister more attractive, wife's sister a little bit older than this one, and this one is realize I'm marrying, and the one that's a little younger married to this guy. This guy's like 60 something, and she's probably 22. This one's about 29, maybe 30. This one's been pretty educated. So she's a little rustled by, the stuff that the old guy's saying in a misogynist way. And the policeman is, you're right, sir, about her. She's blah, blah, blah. No one's going to marry her. Nobody, her boxes, and they're making all these like kind of beyond misogynist things. And this is only like the first 5 minutes of the movie. And the guy is still thinking about his watch, but no one's watching the watch. He goes, we don't have to. Because everyone here knows that if they touch that watch, I'll kill them. Right? And so the fear, and he goes on about how to control those people is through fear, right? And through, and he uses the word systemic institutional fear. This is the first 5 minutes of the freaking movie, and all of America is being explained by this movie, the gangs of New York, right? So, they turn around, and again, the guy is talking about liberalism, and the party will make sure that everything works just fine for business, right? And he goes, and we need these people, and we need people like you. You are them. You're not me. I'm rich and powerful, and I'm Dutch, and I'm Protestant, but I respect you because you protect us. You understand your place, and you're rewarded, right? So that shows the pyramid scheme, right? That guy is not up here; he is here, and the policeman is down here, and all the rabble that's in the mud is down here. So. And that's why in the, motif of the totem pole, when they say, oh, you're the lowest man on the totem pole. Well, the lowest man on the totem pole is most important because they are the foundation, right? Let's see. 12:01. Okay. I have an appointment around 2-ish. So let's see, how much juice do we have left? Oh, well, where my glasses? Can't see it. Oh, we have about 70%. About another 40 minutes, right? So anyway, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. And I am here to tell you, thank you for coming. And I'd love to, this one thumbs up. Thank you very much for that. There's nobody here. Come on, let's get a few people up here. Come on. We've just watched this guy. Let's see about this guy. Listen. Let's see.
Out of the Speaker's lobby, across the street to congressional office buildings, where we find Pete Sessions, Republican of Texas. Congressman, it's good to meet you.
Thank you very much.
I want to start with the news, which is y'all just managed to pass the rules package. No drama that I could see. Should that start restoring some faith to those who worried this Congress was not going to be able to get stuff done, even pass basic stuff?
I think it's interesting for people to know that what they watched was what I call sausage being made in public.
Well, that's bullcrap.
Same voice messages. First voice message.
That's bullcrap. There is nothing. This is just a theatrical show, right? Our government, our everything. The world in general, it's an illusion. The only thing that exists is love, co-creation. That's the only real thing, and everything else is an illusion. Let's see.
Listen, Esther, you could be the answer, but let me just tell you something. You aren't the only possibility. I love this phrase in the middle of verse 14. He said, there could be in enlargement or help or deliverance for the Jews from some other place. You may not be the only answer. You could be the answer, but you might not be the only answer. And I wish Mordecai were here today, because I'd like to ask him what he's thinking about. I'd like to know what other options he was thinking about. I mean, at this particular point in time, understanding the story, Esther looks like their only hope. And from the human perspective, she was. Obviously, Mordecai was a man of faith. Though he didn't see any other human option, he may have thought God has another way to come through in behalf of his people. Option number one, Esther, is you can be destroyed. Option number two, God may just pass over you and use somebody else. Or option number three, you may have been born for such a time as this. Maybe God has placed you right in the center of this situation so that you can be God's person, even though it is very uncomfortable. So Esther now has to think this over. Notice verse 15. The decision of a lifetime. Then Esther bade them return to Mordecai this answer. Go gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. Now, the first definition of sovereignty is you're born for such a time as this. But the response to sovereignty is to say, if that's true, I'm going to do what God wants me to do. And if I perish, I perish. I'm not sure how much of what Esther said in that last phrase was of a spiritual decision, or if she had sorted out the options and figured out that in 11 months she was going to die anyway, so she might as well take the risk and at least have the possibility of escaping death if God indeed was in this whole thing. But whatever she meant by what she said, her words have come down to us with great power. There are actually books that have as their title, If I Perish, I Perish. A reminder to us that our survival isn't the only important issue, that the important issue is that we cooperate with God Almighty and that we be available to Him. And that cooperation with God Almighty is when we work together, co-create all our relations. The Bible says that Mordecai went his way after he heard this and did according to all that Esther commanded him. Sometimes it's awkward to stop in the middle of a story, and especially when we have to wait for the whole weekend. So whatever you do, don't miss on Monday. We'll bring this particular part of the story to some sort of.
And that conclusion is, guys, wake up. You are Esther, whether you're a guy or a girl. Gender doesn't matter. See, in this, biblical point of view, Esther, she was, Mary, who was Jesus's cohort. Everyone said she was a prostitute. No, she was like Esther. She was a priestess of the temple. She was an oracle. The Oracle of Delphi wasn't the only bunch of oracles, right? So that's what that is about. Esther, she had the guy defines the choices. That guy's a really good teacher, right? That's why I listen to that radio channel, because they have some pretty interesting guys on there. And what it does for me, because I can't see too well, it's like reading the Bible. They read it. I listen. They make some really interesting points of view. I think about. That's why I record them. I think about it. I write about it, and I put it in my stories. Right. That's what a griot does. Right. So and that's what I do. And anyone who has anything on the ball sees this. Right. So that's why my whole life. The people at the top has said, well, look at this guy. He's interesting. Let's talk to him. So, homeboy, you want to work for us? Sure. No problem. Okay, can you sign this? No. But I won't spill the beans, and you can pay me a little bit more. and I'm here only to serve love's co-creation. That means you guys, I can not serve you, but work for you and bring out the best in you. Conscious intent I am, and you're going to do your best. You're not perfect, but you can do your best. And I'm going to keep you aware of your parameter, and you're 20. And they said, wow, that's great. Sure, no problem. Yeah, we'll let you, we'll give you the inside poop. We'll let you see behind the curtain, and, yeah, you don't sign this thing, that's fine. You do anything we don't like, you're dead meat. I say, yeah, I know, no problem. So, but I'm now in my mid-70s, meaning not a problem, because if I hadn't been serving love's co-creation, I'd be dead meat already. And there's I've died 7 times, right? And every time the last 4, I had a good life review up to that point. And they all said, hey, look at that. You're doing a great job. Got to go back. Wait a minute. I'm ready to. Well, sure, you can stay here, but you'll have to go into the karmic blender and pop out someplace else. You'll have no idea where you're going to pop out. This way, if you just keep going on what you agreed to do, we all agree when we come into this mortal coil to serve love's co-creation. And that's the only reason why this world still exists. Now, we have a free will, so we're like, did you ever had that little toy with a piece of cardboard and a little plastic film, and you got like a ice cream stick, and you can draw on it, and then you can just lift the screen up? It's like a poor man's Etch-a-Sketch. And it goes away. That's when we're born. We have all of these memories and understandings, but as soon as they slap us on the butt, and the timer starts clicking away on the only thing you're sure of is death. So look, here it is. Oh, look at it. I love it. It is 1 hour, 1 minute, and 1 second. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. So here we are, and we are just seeing, it's Friday, right? And we're doing the so is zone, and there's Chernobyl right in the way of the war zone, and the Russians captured it, and then they turned it into a military base because they didn't think anyone would shell it, but they did dig a big military trench around it, and the soldiers who dug it up and then sat in it over a couple of weeks all got severe radiation poisoning. About 900 of them died a unbelievably painful, disgusting death, and about another 3,000 got radiation poisoning and pretty much are screwed for the rest of their life. They went back home. I don't know what they're doing now, but 9 of them died right there, right? It was so still unbelievable toxic that and you'd think the Russians would have known that, because that was their thing. They dealt with the Chernobyl thing. They covered it up in concrete, the blah 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 blah. And right off the bat, when I saw that happen, like within the first 2 months of the war, I said, these guys don't know what the crap they're doing. And they sure don't care for their soldiers in the field, that's for sure. And boy, they've pretty much shown that, because somewhere around 200,000 Russians have been killed, KIA, killed in action, and or severely injured to the point that they probably wish they had been killed in action. So there's been 200,000, give or take, Russians that have been misused by the military that they are representing. Now, the Ukrainians, pretty much, I don't know if they have, Ukrainians have probably lost and been injured 125,000, right? But this is in Ukraine. 7 million folks have been dislodged from Ukraine and went west, and another 2 million have been taken by the Russians and taken into Russia, right? Now, that didn't happen to any Russians yet. And those 2 million that went in, and that's not a solid number. I'd say somewhere between 600,000 and 2 million have been taken into Russia. And most they didn't take men, and they didn't take old people. They took women of baby bearing age and young children up to the age of around 11. about after 11, if they were boys, they kind of shot them in the head. If they were girls, they would take them so they could rape them and have babies with them. And that's part of one reason why, because the demographics of Russia's getting really, really old, as the man, the demographic economist who started to show off with was saying, right? China and Russia have the two worst at this moment, demographics. And then you have South Korea and Japan and a few other states having the best people who had the best demographics are the Africans. They have more young people than anybody else, and that's why they're being starved to death, because the globalists, or the hidden hand, they're not globalists. What we think of as globalists are like Mr. Schwab and those clowns and Mr. Rothschild, but those guys are just the poster boys, just like Elon Musk and small penis Billy Boy and dead Apple Boy and all those guys, and they're just, they didn't invent nothing. Billy Boy did not. Microsoft was not, Billy didn't do squat. He bought, stole, and cheated everything his way, and then right when he got to this point in his imperial making, he moved all his software engineering and whatchamacallit, when you buy something, you are the whatever you are, so that kind of assistance, right? He moved that all to India and paid them pennies, right? And so that's why, Microsoft made a fortune. They cornered a certain part of the market. They got certain computer guys to use their Windows on the computers. So he got people stuck into, just like Google. Google used the same business model with a search engine, right? And so anyway, and these people didn't invent any of this stuff. All of this stuff, they were just put in place to be the poster boys of this stuff. They didn't make it, they didn't do it, they didn't market it, they didn't organize it, they didn't do any of the above. They just were the ones that were marketed as, oh, these guys are the billionaires, right? So when things go south, we're going to blame Elon Musk. When AI starts, chewing up everyone, and everyone's got their brains fried by his little microchips that are being put into soft drinks, and don't believe a word I say. Good morning, good evening. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob, this guy right here, and your griot telling you stories. These are stories for your entertainment. There's nothing real. Don't believe a word I say. Check it out for yourself, because you're the decider. You are. Yes, you are. Don't go along with anybody. You're the decider. So what else can we go on with? Let's see. Anybody there? Nobody's there. 1:08. Oh, let's listen to.
As he tells it in an anecdote he told his first biographer, his mother said, "I can't take it anymore. We got to leave your father." And so very dramatically, in the midst of a tour, they just hopped a train, left Joe at a Los Angeles theater with his trunk, and they were gone. He did eventually sort of rejoin the family, although he never lived with his wife again. He wasn't estranged from them forever, but that was a very decisive moment where, this family that had spent basically every moment together, for Buster's entire life, living on trains, performing, traveling around, were suddenly split up, and he needed to reimagine himself as a solo performer and decide what he was going to do next,
Buster
which at first
Keaton
was not the movies.
We need to take a break here. Let me reintroduce you. We are speaking with Dana Stevens. She is the film critic for Slate. Her new book is Cameraman, Buster Keaton, The Dawn of Cinema and the Invention of the 20th Century. We'll continue our conversation in just a moment. This is Fresh Air.
So that's, and all of that stuff. Keaton was one of the first guys to really utilize Hollywood, meaning because all the movies were made. I mean, he started out in vaudeville in New York, first, England, New York, East Coast. And then movies were made, the first, silent films that were cranked were made in Long Island, right? And they moved to, well, Long Island's cold, it's dark, it rains, it snows. And California was already, it was like where you went to really, woo, you could reinvent yourself. And the movie industry moved there relatively like probably 1890s to 1910. Everything was kind of going on the East Coast, but it was starting to happen there. By 1910 into the 20s, it all kind of moved because it was always sunny. You could shoot anywhere, any place, anytime. Everything was wide open. There were cities and buildings and stuff and cowboys. I mean, you could do any kind of movie real cheap, real easy, right? And so, and there was no, unions were happening on the East Coast, not so much on the West Coast. And there were really rich men who, ran everything. A good example of that, again, another movie, Chinatown. Jake, don't bother with it. It's Chinatown, meaning, that's, what's going on in California kind of started in the 1890s. I mean, it really started with the gold rush, but the institutionalized, industrialized corruption of California started then, right? And that's why Lockheed Aerospace, all those guys who own the 23rd century, I mean, all the stuff you see up in the air, oh, that's a flying saucer. No, that's like it's TR-7, that's one of ours, right? Not to say that, you look in the Bible and there's the burning wheel in the sky. If that ain't a UFO, I don't know what is, right? So now those, the dimensionals, the Watchers, it's in the Bible. The Watchers, go look up the Watchers in the Bible. The Nephilim, is in the Bible. All of these guys, it's right there. I mean, the Bible is a righteous book. It's who you are learning it from. Who is trying to drill a hole in your head and pour whatever magic syrup into your brain. And that's not what love's co-creation is. The fact that you're supposed to be co-creating with God, Elohim, and why I'm not a fan of the word God, because if you take it back to Sumerian, it means gob, which means thing of gold's power. So, good morning, good evening. There's nobody here, right? So this is a good show. I hope somebody listens to it louder in the day. Let's see how many people watch the other shows. Let's see, where is it? Come on. There we go. Your channel. There I am live. Hello, live boy. Let's see. Videos. Okay, where's my glasses so I can see this stuff? Boop, boop, boop. Oh, let's for fun sake.
This is called 1 Week, and it's the story of a couple that buys a mail order house. I didn't know what this was. What was a mail order house back then?
I mean, this ended up turning into an entire chapter in the book because I too was so fascinated at the background of, what is this kit home that he receives in 1 week with his bride, played by Sybil Seeley, and it's a wedding gift in the case of the movie, right? Just a big box of boards and nails and makings for a house, and they start turning it into a house. So the conceit of the movie is that they build a house together in 1 week, but what they're actually riffing on is, of course, the popularity of home kits at the time, the Sears model homes and other companies as well. There was a real fad right in this very period we're talking about, in the teens and 20s and a little bit into the 30s, where, that was sort of the hot thing, to order your house kit from a company, have it shipped to you by rail, and then what usually happened is a crew put it together. It wasn't usually the couple itself putting the the house together. But of course, the gags that he gets out of it is, it's kind of a domestic comedy. The idea of this young newlywed couple in love trying to make a beautiful home for themselves, and everything they do comes out completely cockeyed.
Right. And the conceit was that a jilted lover of his bride messed them up by renumbering the crates that the pieces of the house come
Yes,
in.
this is a great one.
It's pretty remarkable, some of the stuff that you see him do. It's absolutely hilarious to watch. There's also a scene early in the film where he's going down the street in a car, Buster Keaton, and he's trying to step from one car to another. Actually, one car has his bride, which is irrelevant to the gag, but he's straddling the running boards of two cars going in the same direction. And as the cars get a little farther apart, obviously it's scary because his legs will only stretch so far. And then suddenly, a motorcycle comes from the opposite direction, goes right between the two cars, and plucks Buster. He falls under the handlebars, I guess, in the lap of the motorcycle rider going the other direction. This is amazing. It's the kind of thing that I guess stunt people would do now, or you might use, computer graphics or camera trickery. He would do these things for real, right?
For real.
Yeah, and I mean, that.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. President Biden's unveiled his $6.8 trillion budget proposal for the 2024 fiscal year. The plan would begin the process of trimming $3 trillion from the federal deficit over the next decade by raising taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations and allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Progressive groups praise the White House plan for investing in healthcare, housing, and the environment while expanding free community college, early childhood education, and childcare. But Biden's budget also includes a request for a record-shattering $886 billion in military spending. Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy has signaled Biden's budget will be dead on arrival on Capitol Hill. House Republicans have yet to unveil their own budget. Biden said Thursday he's prepared to negotiate with Speaker McCarthy at any time.
Because they're paid off to do what
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other leaders in Israel Thursday, where he called for an independent judiciary and for de-escalating tensions with Palestine, reiterating the U.S.'s deep commitment to Israel's security.
But the United States also remains firmly opposed to any acts that could trigger more insecurity, including settlement expansion and inflammatory rhetoric. And we're especially disturbed by violence by settlers against Palestinians.
Secretary Austin also said he believed diplomacy was the best strategy when it comes to Iran and nuclear weapons. Israel's openly backed military action against Iran. Austin's visit comes against the backdrop of intensifying violence. Earlier today in the occupied West Bank, an Israeli settler shot dead a Palestinian man near an illegal settlement outside the city of Qalqilia. Separately, Israeli forces raided the town of Nilin near Ramallah overnight, arresting relatives of a Hamas gunman and ordering the immediate destruction of his family's home. Palestinians have condemned such demolitions as collective punishment. At least 79 Palestinians have been killed so far this year by Israeli military forces.
last 3 months.
The UN's humanitarian coordinator for Syria has condemned an airstrike by Israel on Aleppo International Airport earlier this week, which forced it to shut down, complicating humanitarian relief efforts as Syrians reel from last month's devastating earthquakes in the region. Here in the United States, a legislative push to end U.S. military interference in Syria through a war powers resolution was voted down Wednesday. The latest effort was led by Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz and supported by a bipartisan mix of progressives and far-right lawmakers. In Beijing, the Communist Party-controlled legislature confirmed Xi Jinping's historic third term as China's president. This comes amidst growing tension with the U.S., including over the issue of Taiwanese autonomy. We'll have more on this after headlines with historian Al McCoy. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, at least 36 civilians were killed overnight Wednesday in an attack blamed on rebels with the Allied Democratic Forces. The killings took place in two villages in part of the eastern DRC near the Ugandan border, where Congolese and Ugandan forces are fighting rebel groups. In Germany, 8 people were killed and dozens more injured Thursday evening as a gunman opened fire on a Jehovah's Witness congregation in the city of Hamburg. Authorities say the shooter, who fatally turned the gun on himself after the massacre, was a former member of the group. This is the 4th known mass shooting in Germany since 2020. Here in the United States, the Gun Violence Archive has reported 105 mass shootings so far in 2023. In West Virginia, an empty coal train jumped its tracks and caught fire in the community of Sandstone Wednesday, injuring 3 workers and spilling diesel fuel into one of North America's oldest rivers. A day later, a Norfolk Southern freight train derailed in Alabama, 80 miles northeast of Birmingham. Local officials said no hazardous materials were involved in the crash. It was the 3rd derailment of a Norfolk Southern train in the U.S. since February, and came as Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw testified before the Senate's Environment and Public Works Committee. Shaw apologized for the derailment on February 3rd, which blanketed the town of East Palestine, Ohio, with a toxic brew of spilled chemicals and gases. But Shaw refused to commit to ending a profit maximization scheme known as precision scheduled railroading. Unions say the practice involves staff cuts, running fewer trains with larger loads, and shortcuts on maintenance. Under questioning from Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, the Norfolk Southern CEO also refused to commit to granting workers 7 paid sick days per year.
Will you make that commitment right now?
No.
To guarantee paid sick days to all of your workers? That's not a radical demand. It really is not. Will you make that commitment?
Senator, I share your focus on our employees. I will commit to continuing to discuss with them important quality of life issues.
Here in New York, prosecutors have signaled they may soon bring criminal charges against former President Donald Trump for campaign finance violations and other crimes. On Thursday, the New York Times reported Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg invited Trump to testify next week before a grand jury that's been investigating a $130,000 hush money payment Trump sent to adult film actress Stormy Daniels through an intermediary. In 2018, Trump's former personal attorney and fixer Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to charges of tax evasion, bank fraud, and lying to Congress about the hush money payments. Cohen says Trump directed him to make them through a shell company shortly before the 2016 presidential election. On Capitol Hill, a spokesperson for Mitch McConnell says the Senate Minority Leader is recovering from a concussion and will remain in a hospital for observation and treatment after he fell and hit his head Wednesday evening. The 81-year-old Kentucky Republican sustained the injury at a dinner for the Senate Leadership Fund's Super PAC at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in Washington, D.C., formerly the Trump International Hotel. Arkansas Republican Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has signed a law dropping a requirement that employers verify the age of children who apply to jobs. A spokesperson for Sanders told the Washington Post the provision was, quote, burdensome and obsolete. Arkansas law allows children as young as 14 to obtain work permits. Republican lawmakers in several other states, including Iowa and Minnesota, have recently advanced similar legislation. This comes after an investigation by the New York Times exposed the forced labor of unaccompanied migrant children as young as 12 at factories across the United States. To see our interview with the report's author, Pulitzer Prize winner Hannah Dreier, visit our website, democracynow.org. Here in New York, Uber and Lyft drivers have declared victory after city regulators granted a pay raise to drivers following a strike campaign. The fare raise by the Taxi and Limousine Commission announced Wednesday replaces another planned raise that was agreed to last year but blocked after a successful legal challenge by Uber. Last week, New York Taxi Workers Alliance Director Bharati Desai testified to the New York Taxi and Limousine Commission.
Every day that's passed, that is $1 million that were collectively owed to this workforce. A workforce that has had to pay for every single penny of operating expenses. Uber and Lyft don't have to pay a dime. A workforce that works not only with economic risk, but also with great risk to their safety and to their life every single day.
In more news from
Sounds
New York,
like a great
Sheldon
American
Thomas,
thing.
a
It is
35-year-old black man
Freedom.
from
That's an
Brooklyn,
American
who was
freedom thing.
wrongfully
Yes.
convicted of murder, has
Freedom.
been exonerated and freed from prison after nearly
I'm a
19 years
businessman.
behind bars.
I'm
Thomas was only
totally, this is
17 when he was
reality.
arrested and
The
accused of killing a
bottom line
14-year-old
dollar.
boy in 2004.
Freedom. Freedom to
Detectives on the
steal.
case
Freedom
misled
to
a witness
lie.
into
Freedom to
identifying
steal.
Thomas as
Freedom to
of
lie. Kill,
another
lie,
person
steal,
with the
cheat.
same
That's the American
name.
way. That's
When the
freedom.
botched identification was brought up in
That's
court, the
the
judge said at the
freedom
time
that
there was
those
still probable
terrible
cause to arrest Thomas
towelheads
because the
wanted
photo
to attack
had
us
enough of a resemblance.
on the
Thomas was
two-thing
sentenced to
building thing.
25 years to life. His
That's the
exoneration
freedom.
follows
That's
over
the freedom
2
they
dozen
don't like.
others after new investigations were launched by the Brooklyn District Attorney's
Freedom.
Conviction Review Unit. And in New Jersey, a monument honoring the abolitionist hero Harriet Tubman was unveiled in Newark Thursday, replacing a statue of Christopher Columbus that was removed in 2020 as racial justice protests erupted nationwide in response to the police murder of George Floyd. Washington Park has been renamed Harriet Tubman Square. Among the guests at yesterday's ceremony were rapper Queen Latifah, who's from Newark, and Tubman's great-great-great-grandniece, Michelle Jones Galvin.
Many call her an American heroine. In our family, we simply refer to her as Aunt Harriet. She's Harriet Tubman, greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad. Aunt Harriet said, I reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other.
Pretty much.
And no man should take me alive.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.
Oh, what happened there? Let's hear this one. He's always fun.
We're actually going to start with our main story tonight, which concerns Ron DeSantis, business Fred Flintstone. DeSantis has been all over the news this week, as he is seemingly every week. He appointed his political backers to a new Disney oversight board. He released a new book, The Courage to Be Free. And by the way, I have a little gift for our studio audience. Look under your seats. The gift is, it isn't there. You don't have to read it. You're welcome. And he also put out this eye-catching video.
Florida is proof positive that we, the people, are not destined for failure.
DeSantis wins. He has made a promise, and he's making good on the promise.
Florida is leading the nation. Decline is a choice. Success is attainable. And freedom is worth fighting for.
Wow, there is a lot there, but Florida's proof that we the people are not destined for failure? I don't know about that, Ron. Last year alone in Florida, a man tried to steal a crossbow by stuffing it down his pants. A woman instigated a police chase so she could cross getting arrested off her bucket list. And a man was charged with battery for throwing a hot dog at a police officer. We the people may not be destined for failure, but a lot of individuals down there sure do seem drawn to it. This all feels like part of a coordinated rollout of DeSantis' presidential campaign, because even though he hasn't yet officially announced he's running, he's already many conservatives' favourite candidate. After his landslide re-election as governor last November, the New York Post proclaimed him the future, which is, depressing. And he received this cringe-inducing introduction from Carrie Lake.
I'll tell you what he's got. I don't know if you heard of this, but he's got BDE. Anybody know what that means? Ask your kids about it later. I call it Big DeSantis energy.
Okay, that is obviously terrible, but just to be clear, if you don't know what BDE is, please don't ask your kids about it later. In fact, for the sake of those kids, I'll just tell you right now, it stands for Big Dick Energy. A kind of easy magnetic confidence that doesn't necessarily mean you have a large penis, or indeed a penis at all. It's just the energy associated. A list of those with BDE include Bryan Cranston, Christine Baranski, the Pixar lamp, Charles Darwin, and Snoopy. Does that make sense? Please come to me and not your kids if you need any penis-related slang explained in the future. And look, it is worth noting, in general, you can't predict much about a presidential race 20 months out. Previous early frontrunners include Jeb Bush, the late Jeb Bush? I don't know. It's unclear. Howard Dean and Rudy Giuliani, who is currently wandering around Central Park covered in $1,000 dressing and screaming about election fraud to pigeons. And DeSantis is eventually likely to have to go up against Donald Trump, which history has shown is no easy task. And while Trump initially struggled to coin a damaging nickname for DeSantis, with his first attempt being the embarrassingly weak Ron DeSanctimonious, he later unveiled something with a lot more punch.
According to the Times, Trump has spent weeks trying to goad DeSantis into a fight, describing him in conversations as Meatball Ron.
Yeah, apparently he was calling him Meatball Ron, and I hate to say it, but Trump still got it. It's perfectly stupid, childish, and hurtful in a way that's genuinely difficult to articulate. Also, it's a pretty good name on its own. If you ask me to describe the perfect Meatball Ron, I'd say, I don't know, maybe a round little hamster or this smiley cartoon character, you know, little arms and legs, little mustache, maybe voiced by Chris Pratt in a straight-to-streaming kids movie with weirdly Christian undertones that feels vaguely anti-Italian somehow. But then, if you simply showed me a photo of this guy, I'd say, forget everything that I just said. That is my Meatball Ron right there. That is my meatball. Whatever Trump calls him in the future, the fact is, Meatball Ron remains a strong contender for the Republican nomination. And while many commentators insist on framing him solely in opposition to Trump, saying things like he's Donald Trump with a brain, that doesn't seem particularly meaningful. It's like saying that new restaurant is better than this chicken pot pie that fell on the sidewalk. Sure, it is, but you're not really giving me much useful information there. If I may quote Tom Brady's publicist while reviewing his old golf photos, let's take Trump out of the picture. And tonight, let's examine DeSantis on his own merits and look at just some of what he has done to and for the over 20 million people of Florida, because it's sometimes less than he claims, sometimes less than his critics claim, and sometimes worse than you may know. And let's skip over his early life, the short version being he grew up in Florida, was a standout baseball player, and even got to the Little League World Series with his local team. He then went to Yale, then Harvard Law School, and subsequently joined the Navy as an attorney. Eventually, he married his wife, Casey, despite having the most bizarre dating tactic I have ever heard. According to a former classmate, DeSantis would apparently tell dates he liked Thai food, but pronounced it thigh. And if they corrected him, he would make up an excuse and leave because, quote, he didn't want a girlfriend who corrected him. And if that is true, wow. Just imagine being on that date. You're out at dinner and out of nowhere, your date tells you that he really likes Thai food. And you think, wait, did he just call Thai food? I must have misheard. But then he goes on to say that he knows a great Thai food restaurant in the area, all while staring very intently at you, almost studying your reaction. So as politely as you can, you say, wait, do you mean Thai food? Like from Thailand? And then suddenly his face drops and he says, sorry, I forgot I have a doctor's appointment tonight. And he leaves, leaving you both with the check and the single greatest first date disaster story of all time. Then, flashing forward, in 2012, DeSantis was elected to Congress, though while there, a former colleague says that he always had his earbuds in to keep people away. And if you're picking up on a theme of Ron DeSantis doesn't like hearing anyone's voice but his own, you're onto something. Because since becoming Florida governor, he's made shutting down dissenting voices something of a feature. Here is a campaign ad from last year in which he shows off his skill at battling the media.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your governor speaking. Today's training evolution, dogfighting, taking on the corporate media. Number one, don't fire unless fired upon. But when they fire, you fire back with overwhelming force. Does it say that in the bill? I'm asking you to tell me what's in the bill. Number two, never, ever back down from a fight.
If I could complete the question, though.
So you're going to give a speech or ask a question? Number three, don't accept their narrative. It's wrong. It's a fake narrative. I just disabused you of the narrative, and you don't care about the facts.
Amazingly, until around 40 seconds ago, Top Gun Maverick was my favourite movie of last year. But now, I'm sad to say it's my least favourite movie of all time, tied with Cats and the Zapruder film. DeSantis is constantly complaining the media is taking him out of context, although it is worth noting that in that ad, he's removing some pretty important context from the media. Take that clip where he said, are you going to give a speech or ask a question? If you look at the start of that exchange, you'll notice that only one person is doing the fighting there.
Governor, what has gone wrong with the rollout of the vaccine that we've seen phone lines jammed, websites crashing?
It's a lot of demand. I mean, I think at the end of the day, excuse me.
If I could finish my
You
question.
just said what has gone wrong, so I'm answering the question.
If I could complete the question, though.
So you're going to give a speech or you're going to ask a question?
With all due respect, Governor,
You asked the question, I'm going to answer it.
I'm trying to finish my
You're not,
question.
no, you're giving a speech. You asked the question.
I am trying to ask you the.
You're going to ask how many questions? You get 3? They only got 1 question. Why do you get 3?
With all due respect, Governor, I'm just asking if I could finish my question.
You didn't. You finished the question.
No, she didn't. And all she's asking you for is some basic accountability. When you see that in context, that's a pretty gross case of someone meatball-splaining to a journalist who's just trying to do a fucking job. Though, to be clear, DeSantis doesn't hate all media. Because there is one notable exception, and it's the exact one that you are thinking of. DeSantis is on Fox News all the time, morning, noon, and night. Even by Republican standards, the mutual affection between him and Fox is pretty extreme. In just one 4-month stretch, the network asked him to appear on its airwaves 113 times, or nearly once a day. With one Fox producer even offering to let him pick the subject matter if he agreed to come on, which is just pathetic. I'll put it this way. If Fox News ever went on a date with Ron DeSantis, they definitely wouldn't correct him when he called it Thai food. But DeSantis isn't just another Fox talking head. He sells himself as someone with a proven track record, and he has done some terrible stuff. For instance, at his urging, his state's medical board banned gender-affirming care for minors, and he signed a 15-week abortion ban into law, while recently suggesting he'd sign a 6-week one if it reached his desk. But lots of Republican governors have done things like that. What makes DeSantis extra popular on the right is his willingness to wage big, symbolic culture wars. He's bragged that he's made Florida the freest state in America, while defending its residents from the greatest scourge of our time.
Wokeism is really a form of cultural Marxism. The wokeism is the new religion.
Cultural Marxism.
We are not and will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
Okay, first, Florida is not where woke goes to die. It's where wealthy Upper East Side New Yorkers go to die. Get your facts straight. But second, DeSantis says woke so often it begins to lose all meaning. But if you wonder what he thinks it actually stands for, his general counsel once helpfully defined woke in court as the view that there are systemic injustices in American society and the need to have policies that address them. Which is a hell of a thing for someone to admit to everyone that you are against. DeSantis might really want to invest in a lawyer more willing to lie for him. I actually understand there's one currently wandering around Central Park who is available if you can catch him, but you'll have to be careful. He's slippy. DeSantis spends a lot of energy decrying wokeness and empty virtue signaling, although he also seems to spend a huge amount of time doing the right-wing version of exactly that. For instance, there was the time that he waded in on Leah Thomas, a trans woman who'd won an event in an NCAA swimming championship. The second place finisher happened to be from Florida, which DeSantis then took as an excuse to come out and do this shit.
If you look at what the NCAA has done by allowing basically men to compete in women's athletics, in this case the swimming, you had the number 1 woman who finished was from Sarasota. We're going to be doing a proclamation saying that Emma is the best female swimmer in the 500-meter freestyle because she earned that.
Okay, aside from being fucking gross and awful, to be very clear, DeSantis doesn't have the power to declare or disqualify winners in college sports, rendering that proclamation completely pointless. But since men in suits seem to be using their platforms to that by signing this, be taken by the season 6 cast of RuPaul's Drag Race. I declare it. It is declared. It is done. But it's gone way beyond just empty, hateful proclamations. DeSantis has also signed a bunch of attention-grabbing bills that seem designed to delight conservatives and enrage liberals. And while the announcements of these bills tend to get a lot of national media coverage, the actual implementation of them can get far less scrutiny. Take DeSantis' so-called anti-riot law, which he passed following the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer of 2020. That law, among other things, strengthens criminal penalties for those deemed rioters at demonstrations. And he loves to brag to conservative audiences about just how mad it's made people.
And I have to say, brag a little bit, our anti-riot legislation was recently criticized by the United Nations. So I wear that as a badge of honor.
Okay. Being chastised by the UN isn't innately positive. What other admonitions would fill DeSantis with a misplaced sense of pride? I was also criticised by the Holocaust Museum. Lego called me a scumbag, and Malala Yousafzai said she punched me in the throat if she ever got a chance. So I wear that as a badge of honour. But it is not just the UN that had a problem with that law. A judge issued a preliminary injunction blocking the key part of it from being enforced, arguing that it could effectively criminalise legal protected speech and that it was vague to the point of unconstitutionality. Now, the same thing happened to his Censorship Act, which again got a huge amount of attention when he first signed it. It threatened social media platforms with fines for banning political candidates, and he proposed it shortly after a number of them had removed Trump in the wake of January 6th because of, that thing. But that law is also under a preliminary injunction from a judge who at one point told the DeSantis administration's lawyers, I won't put you on the spot and ask if you've ever dealt with a statute that was more poorly drafted. And look, he is still fighting those lawsuits, and future decisions could wind up going his way. After all, these cases are going through higher courts that range from fairly conservative all the way up to overturned Roe v. Wade. But even when DeSantis has existing laws on his side, his application of them can be slapdash and gross. Just last year, he made a big show of announcing his new Elections, Crime and Security Office had spearheaded the arrest of 20 people who'd voted illegally. But these were largely people who the state had cleared to join the voter rolls, so they assumed they were eligible to vote, despite the fact that they technically weren't. Now, one way of dealing with that would have been to simply contact those people, explain the mistake, and remove them from the rolls. But instead, what DeSantis chose to do was to send armed cops to conduct arrests, with body cam video later revealing police with guns drawn, pulling people out of their houses. And if you listen to the cops involved, even they seem annoyed and embarrassed at what they're having to do.
Just dump this shit on me, like, they want to understand big county operation. Wow.
I ain't commit no fraud.
Well, so that's the thing. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but you do have a warrant. That's what it's for.
Why is y'all doing this now and this happened years ago?
I don't know. I have no idea, man.
Wow. Do you have any idea how sketchy your order needs to be for cops to enforce it reluctantly? Enforcing laws on scared people is one of their favourite things to do. It's that, make siren go wee woo, wee woo, wee woo, and end of list. Now, since then, several of those cases, including all those we just showed you, have been dropped or dismissed. But it really feels like DeSantis' main aim there, as in so many cases, was just to instill fear, to make people afraid to protest, or to moderate content, or even to vote. And that is the thing. Even his sloppily written laws can end up doing real harm. And maybe the clearest place to see all of this in action is in Florida's schools, because he has been very busy there. You probably remember last year's passage of HB 1557, the Florida Parental Rights in Education Act, also known as the Don't Say Gay Bill, though DeSantis says that name pushes a false narrative and has claimed that the bill simply says no sexual instruction to kids pre-K through 3. But the truth is, the bill is not as narrow as that at all, as this DeSantis supporter openly acknowledges.
What this bill is trying to prevent is indoctrination of our children.
But the bill is a sweeping, general piece of legislation that doesn't just apply to young children, it applies throughout the entire age, where it says age-appropriate teaching of gender identity and sexuality.
So the bill, it does, you're right, it targets kindergarten to 3rd grade, and it says, or age-appropriate.
Yeah. So when is it age-appropriate to talk about homosexuality?
It varies by the individual.
You would sue a teacher if they started talking to your daughter about same-sex marriage or LGBTQ issues at the age of 17.
If they don't have my consent and I think it's not appropriate for my daughter, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would be quite shocked to hear that.
Well,
because it's kind of a mainstream.
That is the law.
Exactly. I know that's rough to hear, but he is technically right there. Thanks to Ron DeSantis, right now, it is the law in Florida. And quick side note, it's funny how it's always the people who think homosexuality as a concept needs to be taught at an appropriate age that don't give a second thought to when they teach their kids what heterosexuality is. Although, I could be wrong. Maybe in that guy's family, his kid asks every day, "Who are you people living in my house?" And he responds, "Well, my name is Dad, that lady is Mom, and we're friends. Don't ask me any more questions until you're 18 or I will fucking sue you." And it is not just sexuality in DeSantis' crosshairs. He's also passed an act called the Stop Woke Act, which limits the ways concepts related to systemic racism and sex discrimination can be discussed in schools. And to hear him tell it, laws like that are badly needed because the wokeness in schools goes way deeper than anyone might think.
I will have math books sent to my Department of Education for review, these textbooks, and they will do things like woke math. And I'm thinking to myself, 2 + 2 = 4. It's not 2 + 2, well, let's have a struggle session over that. How do you feel about it? No. There's a right answer here.
I mean, out of context, he's completely right there. Numbers don't have feelings. If they did, this one would be sad, this one would be giggly, and this one would be exciting for a few minutes, but then the novelty wears off and it mostly just gets tired and sore. DeSantis has claimed that his state had to reject math books for containing indoctrinating concepts like race essentialism, especially bizarrely for elementary school students. Now, that is a big claim. And if it sounds like bullshit to you, that's because it absolutely is. Reporters for these outlets combed through thousands of pages of elementary school textbooks and their reviews and couldn't find any such examples. And when the DeSantis administration eventually produced just 4 tiny snippets of what they claimed was objectionable material, 42 that came from grade school books, there is nothing about race, although one does suggest students practice with empathizing with classmates while they fulfill a lesson objective of identifying numbers from 1 to 5 in sequence. That is it. So his big claim of woke math and race essentialism in grade schools is basically regular math and trying to teach kids not to be dicks to each other. A kind of math education that DeSantis himself, frankly, might have benefited from, as his solution to figuring out the difference between 1 and 3 questions seems to be yell until the other person stops talking. And the most recent thing you may have heard about are books being pulled from shelves in Florida schools, with viral images like these making the rounds online. Now, in classic fashion, DeSantis has pushed back on those images hard.
They've tried to create in Florida a narrative. It's basically a book ban hoax. It's a hoax what they're doing. And they're trying to say that because we have parental rights and because we have curriculum transparency, if you have a book that has hardcore pornography for in a library that 10-year-olds can access, a parent objects to that, that does not satisfy Florida standards. It should not be in the library with those young kids. And I think 99% of parents agree with that.
Okay, first, let's debunk the most egregious claim there, because 99% of parents don't agree on anything. I'm pretty sure you can find at least 10% of parents who are against covering electrical sockets in reach of toddlers. They're called Zap Moms, and they're all about letting kids discover their own limits of electricity. But I will give DeSantis this. There has been some misinformation floating around online. This viral list of books that were supposedly banned statewide in Florida circulated widely, but it's nonsense. Having said that, those images of empty shelves are very real and are the direct result of DeSantis' actions, because he signed legislation mandating that only approved books could be included in any school or classroom library, and that approval must come from a certified media specialist. That led some districts, including the ones those photos are from, to tell teachers to remove or cover books, not because they were pushing a false narrative, but because they were trying to comply with DeSantis' stupid law. And while DeSantis might say, well, this isn't overreaction because those books will return once they are approved, not all of them. Because thanks to his new law, as well as that Don't Say Gay bill and his Stop Woke Act, he has turbocharged the movement among conservatives to get books removed from libraries that they just don't like. And this goes way beyond removing hardcore pornography or the usual kind of give and take between parents and school boards that has been going on for decades now. What DeSantis has done is make it so anyone in a community can challenge these books. Reporters tracked down one woman who submitted 21 book challenges in one county, only to find that she's a retiree with no children who fully admits that she hasn't read all of them, but I've read them in partial. So basically, she just skimmed them and said, I'm pretty sure nobody should should read this, which is coincidentally exactly how I feel about Ron DeSantis' new book, but I'm not trying to get it taken out of libraries, am I? Meanwhile, this teacher in Escambia County, Florida, challenged around 115 books, among them titles like And Tango Makes Three, a picture book based on the true story of two male penguins at the Central Park Zoo who raised a baby chick together. Apparently, one of her objections to it is that a second grader could read it and the idea would pop into their mind that these are two people of the same sex that love each other. And the problem is, schools are acting on those sorts of complaints. There was a recent school board meeting in that county to address the calls to ban 3 of the books on that teacher's list, including The Penguin book. Multiple community members.
Well, okay, you get the idea. We are living in but we've always lived in a surreal world. You know, like I say, the only thing that exists is love's co-creation. All else is illusion. Now, this guy, he does a pretty good job of telling you about Meatball Sarandis, and that's that guy. I mean, he went after Disney, and he's going to cost the taxpayers of Florida close to $6 billion because Disney took care of the sewer, the water, the fire department, the hospital, the police, you name it, the roads, everything. They took care of it in that, that little section that was their responsibility. And now Disney will make a lot more money because they don't have to do it, and the state does. Good idea, Mr. Meatball. So, where's my glasses go? I'm losing everything. Not everything. Almost everything. Kind of everything. So, let's see. I just had them. Anyway, they're in the car someplace. But I can't read what you're saying. Hey, guys, if you put it in capitals, I can read it. What did I do with that? It should be right nearby. Where did it go? I just had them on me. No, they're not in my pockets. Anyway, so we're getting close to the end of the show. It's been an hour and 50 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, whatever it is. We're getting down to the red line. Not quite. So I got maybe 10 minutes to find my glasses and read. Let's see. Do these work? No, I don't think so. I can't see anything. These are Ron DeSantis meatball glasses. Yes, they are. Yeah. This is what guys like Ron want all the Americans to be wearing, so they can't see anything. See, there's a, forget what horses wear. Forget blinders. This is the new way of looking at your life. What did I do with my glasses? What are you saying? Let me squint. I can't read it. You got to put it in caps for me to read it. When I can't even find my glasses. Where did my glasses go? Come here, glasses. Yoo-hoo! Glasses! What time is it? Oh, it's 1 p.m. Anyway, I got to go. Even though 3 of you showed up, come on, let's see some more thumbs up. What did I do with those glasses? No, not around my neck. Not here. I don't know. Probably fell that way. Okay, let's see. No, I'm sorry, I can't read what you're saying. I hope the others can read what I'm saying, or you're saying. And let's see. It looks like Twilight Zone episode after getting all. Yeah. Ooh, the sun's coming out. That's good. It's like that one, the guys, the aliens land on the front lawn of the UN. We're going to bring priests to the earth to stop fighting, cure all diseases, blah, blah, blah. They do. Everyone's loving it. people are taking a vacation to their planet, and the guy who said we can't trust these guys, and he's trying to break their code, the book they gave them that said to serve man, right? And so he's getting on the onto the ship to go have a vacation, and his assistant, Bob, don't get on. To serve man, it's a cookbook. I think that's, we're like that frog that jumps in the pot. Oh, this is warm. It's nice. And then it starts boiling. Oh, it's a jacuzzi. And then it's soup, right? I wonder how long it's going to take for us to be soup. So anyway, thanks for everybody who showed up. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Go back and watch this show, guys. There's lots of fun things in there. It's great wallpaper. Anybody want to throw anything on the old PayPal? That would be very nice. I'm around here. What you just saw is kind of indicative of what's going on around here. Tomorrow I'll describe, meaning they're basically squeezing the life out of what's left of this holler community and being replaced by cockroaches from California and Florida and New Jersey and North Carolina and New York and other places where the rich people who think they're rich, they're not. There's virtually nobody rich in America. They have big credit lines, and I'm rich. I got a big fancy car and I can scream louder than you. Meatball Ron, he's a good example of someone who thinks he's rich and powerful, but he's just being used, And so anyway, I've been here 20 years, and there's about 30 lots in this place, and nobody was here for 18 years. It was like a nature preserve. And in the last year, all the lots have been sold, and sold more than once. And so people are starting to build, and they're going to develop it and make it into whatever they're going to make it into. But no longer, the animals were already left. The plants, the biofilm is already leaving and dying, and the energetics of this place is getting intense, and it's okay with me because they're my friends, and it's all right for me. But everybody else, like the moron down the road, he came and bought this house from this guy who bought the house from this other guy who bought it from another guy who basically stressed the old lady who lived in it. She bought it. She made a nice little house, and he stressed her out. That she kind of freaked out, and he just kept turning on the stress on her, and she got cancer and died. Then he bought it at a tax sale, right? And then he went in there and lived in it, and the walls, that lady's angst for like the 3 years that he was like screwing with her, basically coated the inside of the walls. It's known as black mold. He didn't know it. He just, wasn't sensitive to it. So he died, of that. And again, he was dying. He's running out of money to go to the hospital, take care of him. And then another guy did the same thing to him. And that guy died of the black mold. And then the next guy died of the black mold. And now the guy who's in it now, good luck. And he didn't, when I started talking, she goes, I'm a businessman. I don't believe in things like that. You don't know. What you can't, I'm going to, in the bus. What is that? Now, don't let anyone bully you. Just take my deal. Forget everyone else. I'm going to give you 5 cents for your place. And that's very generous. So, good morning, good evening, and I love you so much. Just keep up the good work, right? Salutations. Thank you, my friend. There's Fish. Hello, sweetheart. So, I'm in the red zone, so I'm getting out of here right now. So, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, that was in the beginning, is now, ever shall be, world without end. Now, I said that slowly, and I did it in little chunks, so you could deconstruct it and understand what that prayer is about. It has nothing to do with religion. It's not some, you're going to hell. Oh. No. It's a tomorrow we'll have a little theological thing. Go look up Esther. All you girls, the other day was Women's Day. Esther was a person who basically saved the Hebrew nation. So go check it out. I mean, Esther is probably more important than Moses, right? So check it out. Okay, guys, I love you all. I'll be speaking to you. The dudeawake42 at Gmail, dudeawake42 at Gmail. Email, Montanaro, PayPal. No one has in the last month or so. I want to thank the 4 people who have since 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I've had 4 things dropped into my PayPal since Thanksgiving. But the last month, February, it was even it's my birthday, and still, right? So anyway, gotta go because we're against timeline and battery, and I never love leaving the show go with a dead battery is never good. Okay, so I gotta go. I'll speak to you tomorrow.